My reading story is actually several stories. Um, I have, I can back up to when I was a kid. So when I was a kid, uh, we, I was the first college graduate in my family. So we didn't have a long background of people going to college. Um, we didn't have people in my family. They were mostly miners, people who worked kind of out in the Eureka area of Utah. And for me, reading was sort of a gateway, right? It was a way that something that opened up a world of learning and knowledge and information. I had great, very supportive parents who wanted us to learn, wanted us to be educated, but they were very busy. My mom worked very long hours, about you know sometimes 80 hours a week, running her own business. And she would have liked to have been more present and more able to be there to read with us, but it just wasn't an option. And so as a result, one of the things that she did and that we appreciate now very much is the library in some ways became our babysitter, right? And so she would take us to the library, my brother and I, and we would just go crazy. And we read, and we kind of started over with the Garfield cartoon books and worked our way up from there. And it opened so many doors of interest and curiosity and things that we wanted to do and learn about. When I was in first grade, I wanted to be an archaeologist, and then I wanted to be a physicist, and then I went through all these things basically because of that experience I was having reading and learning. So that's kind of the first step for me, and it kind of set me on a certain trajectory. In seventh grade, I had an experience where I was in a creative writing class, and we had an author who came in, and this author, he was a Western writer, and there was sort of a contest, and he wanted us all to write a short story. And there was something about that, engaging with that author and talking with him and learning about what he did and then reading what he had created, which was magical for me, right? And really changed the course of my interests and so forth. As I went through high school, I gained more and more focus to what I wanted to do. And then in college, I graduated in history, got a master's in public policy, and went into a very demanding master's program at Harvard. And while I was there, my health was getting really, really bad, worse and worse all the time. And it's kind of funny, I had spent, for the past several years, I'd read nothing but political science. I was very focused and reading things on current affairs and public policy. And my health was just deteriorating so quickly. And my wife basically said, I think you need to put something else in your brain. You need a break. You need, to do something else. And as, I don't know, ridiculous as it seems, for me, that thing that helped the most was just starting to read fiction again and starting to read, kind of like I did back in the library as a kid, starting at the simplest level. And so at night, instead of worrying about econometric analysis, I read a Hardy Boys book, right? And it was able to put my brain in neutral. And by putting my brain in neutral, I was able to get some sleep and kind of recover my health. So I was on a very bad trajectory before I started doing that. And so in some ways, yeah, it literally saved my life in that particular case. My dad was sort of a philosopher king who, unfortunately for him, wound up as a sheet metal worker, right? I mean, he was kind of ill-fit to what he did, but he was a man who loved ideas and had this intellectual curiosity. And we would always discuss whatever we had consumed that day, school, books, if we watched something on TV, watched a lot of science shows with him, Nova and so forth. But the dinner table was a place where we would eat, but it was primarily a place of discussion. So we would have a conversation around various topics, and the debate would go, for hours if it needed to, right, for us to really flesh out an issue. And it was this thing where I still remember the day very clearly. I was at the dinner table. We were out back, and he was doing some woodwork or something. And the day that I finally felt like I beat him at one of these debates, these friendly debates that we had, and it was a turning point for me. I was like, oh, these are actually winnable on my end, right? And so that engagement and that kind of, back and forth of ideas was really, really valuable and important in our household. Reading is big at the Peterson household. I try to read as much as I can with my kids to get them excited and interested. It's kind of a learning process. I think maybe, people who have a background in education, maybe they know better than I do. But as I've learned what sort of books to read, when to read them, and how to read them, right? And that all those things are very important. And occasionally, what I enjoy is when I will remember some book that really affected me, and then I will scour the interweb trying to figure out where I can find that book, or if it's at my local library. So just recently, I remembered the old Choose Your Own Adventure books, right? How much I enjoyed those, and we found them at the library. And so we would, we'd read the book together as a group, and each kid takes a turn making a choice as you get to one of those decision points. But then afterwards, we would come here to UVU's campus, and on campus, we would play Choose Your Own Adventure, right? So we've read, and now we're going to connect it to an actual activity. So we'd come to a crossroads, in the paths, a juncture in the sidewalk, and it was Laurel's turn to decide, are we going to go this way or this way or this way? And they each take their turns, and along the way, this whole world that they're creating kind of evolves and comes into being. It was really neat to see for me. I think that it's really important, or it can be very valuable for kids to actually connect with an author, right? If you read a book and you become immersed in this world, and it's something that's meaningful to you, then that meaningful world becomes all the more so at the point where you meet its creator, right? And you go, wow, this came out of your head, right? And I think that can work both ways, as Brandon Mull mentioned. Maybe a kid doesn't pick up the book beforehand, but they meet him, and hey, I met an author, and I'm excited about that, and this guy creates books, and then they read and go that direction. So, like the story I told from my middle school creative writing class, that was a big thing for me, to meet an author, I can't even remember his name. That's not the important piece. The important piece was meeting this person who creates these worlds, and getting a sense for what's involved. It just, for me, it really sparked that interest in reading to a much greater degree. So it's something I'm passionate about. I think the more we can have kids actually meeting authors, the greater we're going to be able to get them to become engaged and interested in reading. I had a creative writing teacher, and I believe writing and reading, there's a big connection there too. I had a creative writing teacher in middle school who was very influential for me. And prior to that experience, my interest in reading wasn't super high. I've always been a reader. I've never been a fast reader, and so when somebody hands me a thick book, it's a commitment, right? I've got to actually decide that I want to commit the time to this. And that experience of being in that creative writing class and being part of the art of creating a written world, it advanced for me that interest in reading. Kind of took it to that level where now I'm on an ongoing basis. I've become much more willing to commit to, a reading project, right? A book, whether it's something on econometrics or, a middle grade fantasy book. But I feel there's a real strong connection between reading and writing that needs to be emphasized.